A well-known famous actor, Alistair Pinch's wife Monica, was found dead in his mansion's living room. Alistair is a drunk asshole who has a popular TV show, Johnny's Bench, worth millions per week. Charlie's former girlfriend, Lorena, went to visit him to see if he wants to help prove Alistair, a famous actor in Hollywood, was innocent. Lorena knows of Charlie's cantankerous past with his former police officers, judges, and past friends. 11 years ago, Charlie's confidential informant, Donnie Lips, told Charlie his brother, Lyndall Lips, killed a girl behind the counter in a store and 2 customers. Charlie pressed the issue and Lyndall Lips went to jail. 7 years later, Charlie found out Lyndall Lips was innocent and tried to convince his former friends, police officers, and judges he needed to be set free. Before Charlie could get his former CI, Lyndall Lips, out of jail, he was stabbed to death in a prison yard. Charlie quit the force and talked to anyone with a microphone, which burned a lot of bridges. Charlie has been blackballed ever since. That's why Charlie is living on a mountain in a trailer with a chicken. Lorena mentions the TV network who produces Johnny's Bench is looking for a private investigator to clear Alistair's name. Lorena added it also could boost Charlie's career again. After Lorena left, Lieutenant Big Jim Cuppy from Charlie's old precinct went to visit Charlie. Lieutenant Cuppy told Charlie a man named Don Q, who is in the capital recreation pharmaceutical industry, has Lorena on his payroll. Also, Lieutenant Cuppy said Lorena took something from Don Q and he thinks she left it with Charlie. Well, Charlie didn't think too much of that. That night, Charlie was woken up by a beating by 2 men called the Palisade Posse. They told him they want Charlie to stay up on his motherfucking mountain and stay away from Alistair's Bench. Charlie asked the rappers, who said he was taking the case. They showed him the L.A. Studio Reporter newspaper, which read in bold letters, "Ex-cop joins Pinch team." The next morning, Charlie jumped on his bicycle and was going to find out some answers at Black Bear Studios, where Alistair Pinch worked. While in the studio lot, Charlie had a brief conversation with Wilson Sikorsky, head of the television network, a man that can afford a Kudok skeleton watch worth between $4,000 to $500,000, which only 35 are made each year. Charlie found out Wilson put the headlines in the paper about Charlie leading the investigation in Monica Alistair's death. Then Wilson, along with Fontella Davis, Alistair's attorney, offered Charlie a ride in his golf cart to see Alistair. Wilson told Charlie if, after talking with Alistair Pinch, Charlie can decide if he wants to take the case or not. After meeting with Alistair, Charlie decided to stay at least one night at Alistair's mansion to make his decision. That afternoon, Gabby, daughter of Alistair's, strolled into the mansion after being at kindergarten all day. With her sweetness, she invited Charlie to ride with them when they take her to school the next morning. Charlie agreed, and while at Abby's school the next morning, he went to talk to Gabby's kindergarten teacher, Jane White, to find out some information about Monica Alistair's, Gabby's mother. Charlie found out Jane wasn't shocked at all about Monica Pinch's murder. Before leaving, though, Jane handed Charlie a note telling him she will meet him at a certain address that night. Leaving Gabby's school, Charlie noticed there was a blue Cadillac following him everywhere he went. That afternoon, while at Alistair's house, Charlie found a magazine featuring Alistair's living room, which Charlie noticed several differences between the picture and how the living room looked now. That night, Charlie found out where the address Jane gave him. It was at her church choir practice, but they eventually ended up at a bar to talk. Between you and me, the kindergarten teacher got around a lot. Because of Charlie's name and reputation from the past, Jane asked Charlie who was Lyndall Lips. The following afternoon, Alistair got arrested, and that left a lot of free time for Charlie to do some investigation on his own. Being free, Charlie went to find a morgue guide that owes him big time for an autopsy protocol on Monica Pinch, including all the slides and pictures. Someone called Charlie and told him he knows who killed Monica and meet him at his shit of a trailer on top of the mountain where a chicken lives. It was Don Q and his pet Nina. They wanted the thumb drive that was stolen from his place. They gave Charlie 24 hours to find the thumb drive. Getting tired of getting the shit kicked out of him, he went into the police station for some answers about Monica's death. No one at the police station liked him. He did find out Lorena was found dead in her husband's burned-out car. Leaving the police station, Charlie met Warren Gnomes, who told Charlie he has a client that doesn't understand why he's associated with Pinch. But Charlie notices he had the same watch Kudoke Skeleton as Rupert, the head of the television network, had on. Warren also drives that blue Cadillac was been following Charlie around. Warren Gnomes dropped his phone after him and Charlie wrestled a bit. Gnomes left in a hurry. Charlie noticed on Gnomes' phone his last call was Darius James Heady. Charlie did some searching and found out James Heady was making a hostile takeover bid for Black Bear Studios, where Alistair Pinch works. Still searching information, Charlie found out that James Heady's estate was going to host a black tie benefit at Hollywood Hills Mansion. Charlie went underdressed to make a visit to Darius James Heady's party. Charlie found out Darius sent the Palisade Posse and Gnomes on him. Darius told Charlie Gnomes was digging up dirt to help him buy the network, Black Bear, and right now he is dead. Charlie found out later why Darius wanted him to stay away from Pinch. It was because if Alistair was found guilty in killing his wife, he could buy Black Bear Studios for a cheaper price. Since Alistair was in jail, Charlie did some investigating inside Alistair's mansion. Charlie realized the night table in his room doesn't fit. Charlie told Alistair before someone moved his table from his room to the living room, probably on the night of the murder. Charlie received a message from Mammoth Opportunity. Who in the pickles is that? We'll have to find out. It read, "Look in your trunk. Picture of a heart and an elephant." Charlie remembered when Lorena was visiting Charlie, they both walked into the woods where Charlie put a metal elephant for meditation reasons. While Laura was there, her arm was outstretched to the end of the elephant's trunk. Charlie thinks he heard a small metal object fall down the trunk of the elephant, but quickly forgot what he heard and continued to talk with Lorena that day. Charlie looked in his metal elephant's trunk and found a thumb drive. Charlie called Nina, Don Q's pet, to tell his boss he found the thumb drive. One day while on the bus, Charlie received a call from Mammoth Opportunity. It was actually Lorena. Lorena said a guy is going to reach out to him. It was Don Q. Charlie asked Don Q why Lorena was messing with him and not telling she wasn't dead. Don Q said Lorena was working for him by using marital surveillance on behalf of his sister watching his lazy-ass brother-in-law. One day, Lorena at Don Q's chop shop saw a thumb drive on his desk and stole it. Alistair got out of jail on bail and asked Charlie if Jane, the kindergarten teacher, was keeping the baby. Charlie said in his mind, "You say what?" While talking to Jane again, Charlie found out Jane was hoping Alistair would leave his wife, but his wife Monica wanted him to move back to England. Alistair started to ignore Jane. Then one night he texted Jane to come over as soon as she can. As soon as she opened Alistair's front door, Monica was standing there. She was holding his phone and she was on the one that texted her. She wanted to find out who it was, and Monica got unhinged with anger. So Jane left. The next day, Monica was found dead. Everyone blamed Alistair and let the chips fall on him. The next day, Charlie went over to Jane's house and found a large envelope on the bed with his name on inside. He found a razor inside, and Jane was gone. So Charlie goes over to Sikorsky's office, the head of the network. Uh-oh, could be trouble. Charlie told Sikorsky he knows who killed Monica, Alistair's wife. Charlie went on to explain Jane White is Alistair's daughter's kindergarten teacher and is pregnant with his child. Charlie continued and said Jane has left town. Sikorsky knew Jane was pregnant with Alistair's child, and Sikorsky knew once Monica found out, she wanted her and Alistair moved back to England. Charlie went on to explain that Sikorsky knew where Alistair's awards were, and they were under the bed. Charlie said Monica Pinch didn't find out that Jane White was pregnant until the night she died. So she talked to you, referring to Sikorsky himself, about it. It had to be then. Charlie mentioned Warren Gnomes, which had a weird thing with him. Charlie went on to explain he kept following Charlie, and one day he lost his temper and confronted him one day. He got in a fight, and a few days later he got killed. Only reason Charlie brought that incident up was because Warren had the same watch as Sikorsky. The one he was wearing was exactly like Sikorsky, but Sikorsky asked Fontella, Alistair's lawyer, what time it was at the courthouse after Alistair's arraignment. And Charlie's thinking, there can't be two watches around. There's only 35 made. So what's going on here? Charlie said Sikorsky was spending time with Monica while Alistair was spending time with Jane. So he would know what was under the bed. Charlie said when Monica found out that night Jane was pregnant with Alistair's baby and Alistair was passed out cold, called Sikorsky right away. Plus, Monica told Sikorsky she was going to tell her affair with him and was going to convince Alistair to move back to England. Sikorsky couldn't afford to lose Alistair, not with Jamshidi takeover threat. Then Sikorsky drove over to Monica and tried to talk some sense into her. They got into an argument. Sikorsky hit Monica with the Regis Award and she hit her head on the way down. So you started wiping things down and the table that had the Regis Award had blood stain on it. Sikorsky starts to think some of that might be his blood, so he started changing the furniture around. You let Alistair wake up and take the rap. Sikorsky's lawyer, Gnomes, found out what he did and tried to blackmail Sikorsky. So Sikorsky gave him his watch and days later killed him and took his watch back. Why would Sikorsky have the biggest asset on network be charged with murder? Charlie remembers Sikorsky said a scandal makes the show twice as valuable. Sikorsky knew Alistair would get off. It's L.A. The biggest stars always get off. The more publicity, the bigger the windfall. So what does Sikorsky do? He hires a lawyer for Alistair who makes the most noise and a washed-up detective to make even louder noise, even though Alistair's lawyer told Charlie that was the worst choice. Sikorsky thought Charlie would never figure his plan out. Sikorsky asked Charlie what made him so sure his idea was so perfect. Charlie said he was 98% sure and then threw the football to Sikorsky. He caught it and threw it back with his left hand. That was the other 2% because Monica was struck on her right side of her skull with a metal object like the Regis Award, not the vase, because of the shape, and Alistair is right-handed. He couldn't have lifted that 40-pound earthenware vase. Why did Don Q save Charlie? Because Don Q's thumb drive was a poem about a dealer trying to retain his independence and integrity in the era of corporate-style cartels. How would it look to his buyers if a major drug dealer was found writing poems? A coroner in San Bernardino owed Lorena a favor, so he let her have a Jane Doe they were going to cremate, so she burned the body in her ex-husband's car. Wow!